If you're old enough to remember when phones had cords and the only thing that went viral was a cold, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Big 6-0 with Kaylee Harris and Guy Rawlison. Because who better to discuss life's second act than two people who still think mature is a type of cheese?
Welcome to the Big 6-0 podcast, where we chat about life, laughs, all the lessons we're still figuring out past the Big 6-0. I'm Guy Rawlison, your co-host, and as always, I'm joined by my partner in nostalgia, the woman who still knows how I assume to do long division in a head, Kaylee Harris.
Absolutely no idea, but thank you so much. I don't know, a partner in nostalgia, I think I like that. I don't, well, do I? I mean, okay, we're old. Let's just go with that.
I thought women and sort of, am I allowed to say that? Women and long division was always handy because whenever you go to a restaurant, if something costs X amount of dollars, guys will always just, yeah, that's going to be close enough. And women will get it down to the cent.
To the absolute,
almost.
yeah. I mean, long division, there's a whole podcast in that. But that's for another time.
That is for another time. So, look, I tell you something that I was talking to a friend about the other day, and we were talking about helicopter parenting and the things that their kids are doing. You know, they're going to jiu-jitsu and to ballet and to, everything under the sun. Mm. And it occurred to me that it's probably a good enough reason to discuss how things have changed from when we were kids, our parents, their style of looking after little ones, and how parents do things today.
Yeah, and I also want to touch on grandparents because you're a grandparent and you seem to love it and relish it. And I want to hear about that because I'm not yet a grandparent. But I think that's really important too, that generational connection between you and your grandchildren and how that is different to how you parented your kids. But let's go back to how we were parented.
How did we survive without bike helmets? And we were drinking from garden hoses. I mean, we've lived to tell the tale, and really there was just Band-Aids and a bit of hard love to get us through, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think so. But I also think that everybody parents according to their culture and according to their time in history, but also according to their geographical location. So if you were a parent in 1920s Russia, you would parent differently than a parent in 2025 in Sydney, Australia. Do you know what I mean? I think there are so many versions of parenting, and there have been over millennia, that who's to say what is right and what is wrong? I mean, surely, I'm sure there are things that parents did previously that would be frowned upon now, but will there be things that we're doing now as parents that will be frowned upon in the future, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, it's like just about anything, isn't it? I mean, things that our parents did, that whole, and I'm only relating to the things that we grew up with, wait till your father gets home, because invariably there was a threat if you'd done something wrong, or the wooden spoon would be shown as a threat. And of course, that sort of corporal sort of punishment is just something that is just not seen. I mean, you don't even see people getting a paddle across the backside in the shopping centre if they start screaming and whatnot these days. So, of course, there's going to be changes, generational changes in the way, everything from the way we parent through to, and you're right, what happens today or what happened a generation or two generations ago can't be judged by today's standards, or can it?
Well, I think if you fast forward, say, 20 or 30 years, are parents then going to look back at us, like parents like you and I, and go, you were way too soft? Because that's a common criticism of parents these days is, like you said in the intro, helicopter parenting or red carpet parenting, or, they call it lawnmower parenting, where you create a path for your children that is all happy and, lollipops and rainbows. Are parents in 30 years' time going to look back and go, oh my gosh, like that was pathetic. No wonder these kids are so soft. So who's to say what's right and what's wrong and who's right and who's wrong? Or is there such a thing as right and wrong? Or I mean, kids are going to grow up despite us.
Oh, look, the one thing that used to irk me, and I might just be a dinosaur about all this, but everyone wins. You go into a race and everyone gets a certificate because they tried hard. And I don't know whether that's just going to permeate through, the years, and in an office environment and a trade environment, in some sort of social circle. Everyone is going to be a winner, but I can't see that because otherwise we're just going to have a lot of Indians and no chiefs and no direction, because everyone will want to be inclusive. There will be no one to actually take some of these people to where they need to be.
But then who are we to say, though, that, I mean, if you build kids up in the primary school years by, everyone has, you could change the wording to everyone has something to offer. Everyone brings something to the table, so that by the time those kids get into a work environment where it is much tougher, I mean, your boss isn't going to give a crap about how you're feeling that day, like, whether you had a big night the night before or not. That hopefully they have enough love for themselves because they've been valued through primary school. That do you know what I'm saying? It's sort of like, I don't know. You could see good and bad. I can see good and bad in both. I can see, when we were kids, there was a lot more bullying going on when we were kids than, and I personally, I think bullying will always be there. It's human nature, and it's not just kids who bully. All humans, I think, bully to some degree, and I don't think you'll ever get rid of it.
Yeah, look, I love how kids, and I shouldn't say kids, I mean, I'm talking about young adults as well, are inclusive. I love the way that kids and young adults are inclusive, and everyone should have a right to be heard. And the loudest voice doesn't always win anymore. And I think that's admirable, because everyone does have something to offer, and everyone does deserve to be heard. And I love the fact that people are just accepting of it. Doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing, that you are someone special, and everyone has that place in the hierarchy, which wasn't how it was when we were growing up, was it?
I think when we were growing up, we didn't value everyone's opinion. You were either one of the cool kids or you weren't. You were in a cool group or you weren't. And these days, I hope that's maybe we're a little bit more accepting, but I don't know that it is. When you hear about stories in schools these days, kids always want to fit in, and they always want to be like everybody else. And if you don't fit in for whatever reason, because you look different, or you have different views, or you're a different culture, then as humans, we will always point those things out.
Yeah, I think, those challenges from when we were kids, and you're right, if you were the sporty kid or the cool kid, and then you didn't sort of fit into that framework, you're sort of alienated, and you had to sort of find that minority group just to hang around with. But you always knew that there was a hierarchy. Yet today, you will see a different sort of hierarchy where you see influencers out there, and, what they've got so all of a sudden everyone wants to be an influencer, do they? Or they need to still fit some sort of stereotype in some way, shape or form. That's why I really do like how so many kids just, that probably don't fit in that stereotype, do want to be heard, and are heard by the great bulk of the population. And maybe it's only those minorities that, that 5% of people that feel as though, yep, I want to be one of the beautiful people on TikTok, or I want to be one of the beautiful people on Instagram. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Let me take you back to, primary school and your parents when you were at school. How strict were they with you?
I did know that some parents...
Did both parents work?
Yeah.
Let me ask you that.
Yeah. Look, Dad worked, Mum worked while I was up until about the age of 5. Mum was a working mum. So I'd be going to grandparents during the week, or it was called preschool then. It was essentially daycare these days. So I'd go to preschool a couple of times a week and to grandparents a couple of times a week. So, yeah, Mum was a working mum. But as soon as I started primary school, it was a decision made that Mum would stay at home. But there was no doubt that she sort of ruled the roost, and Dad sort of towed the line, and because she was a very strong woman. But those influences have stayed with me in my adult life as well. And it makes it hard because you try and impose those sort of rules on your kids growing up as well. And rightly or wrongly, times have changed. And then you become a grandparent, as I have, and you see your kids and the way that they sort of react and respond to their kids. And as a grandparent, you try and make up for, I shouldn't say the mistakes, but you're a whole lot more lenient than you are with your kids, because you like to think that you're teaching your children the right and wrong way to do things, and then the decisions they make after that are their own. Whether they choose to do something or not is then their choice as an adult. And you hopefully have sort of shown them that there are two options, or sometimes three or four. But as a grandparent, for example, yeah, look, you tend to let a lot of things slide because, you were playing a bad cop quite often.
Well, yeah, but as a grandparent, you're playing good cop now. Like you can be their best friend, and you don't have to be the you don't have to be the disciplinarian, I guess, with them, because their parents do that. So
you get to play Starsky and Hutch and Huggy Bear all at the same time. And yeah, so you've got the best of every world.
Let me ask you this. When you were a kid in primary school, did you get smacked?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
By who? Both parents, or?
It was probably the wood. Now, thinking about it, I didn't get that many. Whether I was really good at hiding what I sort of did, I don't know. But occasionally I'd get a paddle on the backside. The wooden spoon or the feather duster would come out. I remember getting the feather duster. Gee, that used to sting. And it wasn't the fluffy end either. Wow. Yeah. But, of course...
Your mum was next level.
We were somewhere the other week, and we were in a restaurant. It was like a club. And it was in a dining room, and there was a little boy there who was just over the top, and we saw Dad give him a little bit of a paddle on the backside, and we thought, my gosh, you just don't see that in public anymore. It's alien to you. I don't know what your upbringing was like and whether you were.
But it's interesting the language you use as well. When you talk about smacking children, it polarizes people. And people our age who were smacked as kids will go, well, it didn't do me any harm. I didn't smack my kids. I didn't believe in it. I didn't think it was the right thing to do. I thought I wouldn't smack my grandmother, and she's a vulnerable person. Why would I smack a child? And I smacked my son once when he was about 2 for something, and I ended up in tears for 2 days in my bedroom. And call me whatever you like. Call me pathetic. That's perfectly fine. I just found... The bottom line was, it did not make things right. It made things worse. It made me feel worse. It made him cry. It wasn't the right outcome for me. And for any parent to get to a point where they are smacking, they usually have lost a bit of control. You're so frustrated that you just go whack. And as I said, interesting the language that you use, a little paddle on the back. It's not a little paddle on the back, because if it was, it wouldn't have any impact. It's a smack. And you can't even say that, because it's like you say, I smack my kid on the back of the thighs, which is what a few of us would have got. That's not acceptable anymore. So, I often hear people our age saying, oh yeah, I got a little tap on the bottom. It wasn't a tap. Sorry, if it was a tap, you wouldn't have got it. It was a decent smack.
The feather duster was never just a tap, I'll tell you now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's my whole point. Is it like, if you were smacked as a kid when we were young, but that goes back to my whole point in the beginning, that parenting is cultural, and it shows you the time that you're in. And in the 60s and 70s, when you and I were kids, that was perfectly acceptable. And plenty of people today will tell you it still is. And that's fine. If that's your thing, that's fine. It just didn't work for me. I just found it did not make the child listen to me anymore. It made me feel like crap. It made them upset, and it didn't solve the problem about the behavior they were showing at the time. So I just found other ways to work around it.
Well, we were pretty lucky with our kids. I mean, I've got to be honest, I don't remember our kids ever getting a smack. Like we didn't have raucous kids that were just
no, well, neither did I.
So we were very lucky. But yeah. I mean, are they going to look at I mean, timeouts are the big things where,
Yeah.
if you're misbehaving, timeout, you need to go and spend 15 minutes in the corner or whatever.
Yep.
Is that going to be looked upon in another 20 or 30 years as being a
Or a
self-isolation
self-isolation thing, or is it going to be looked as being too soft?
That's right. I mean, you cannot
That's
judge.
my whole point.
Yeah,
Parenting is very dependent on where you are in time and geography and history. Who's to say what's right and what's wrong?
Do you think parents today are too protective, or is the world genuinely more dangerous than it was in our day?
Oh gosh, that's such a hard question, because I think in some ways the world is more dangerous with social media and things like that. But in other ways, it's even safer because we are aware of a lot of the dangers that children can face, and we're prepared to talk about them now. So I think it's a bit of both, if that makes sense. I think that as parents, we are probably a little bit more anxious than our parents were, because we have a lot more information available to us now, and people can be a lot more judgmental about what is a right and what is a wrong way to raise a child. So what's right for somebody may not be right for somebody else.
The reason I ask that as well is because you and I grew up in an era where you'd be told, "Oh, just go outside and play," and you'd go a dozen streets away and go to someone's house and all those sort of things, and you just don't see that now. Or maybe you do. I don't know. I mean, you just don't see kids walking to someone else's house and.
But at that time, that was a time in history and a culture where we did that, and everyone's kids did that, and that was the norm. Whereas now it's not the norm. Do you know what I mean? It's we watch our kids a bit more. We're much more aware of stranger danger with our kids, and we educate them accordingly. And we're much more prepared to talk about those dangers of stranger danger and all those sorts of things. So I think our kids are more aware of stranger danger. But I think there is too much emphasis placed on being a good parent. And your definition of a good parent and mine might be two totally different things. So it's fraught with danger. If you're a parent, it is so fraught with danger because you don't know what's the right thing to do. I think everybody starts out wanting to be a good parent. Not everybody is, because life throws stuff at you, and for whatever reason, you may not be able to manage your kids in a way that society sees as acceptable. But I think we all want to, but it goes back to what I said before, the kids are going to grow up anyway. I think we do. I think sometimes we are a bit soft on them.
Did you have any rules in your house that you look at now and think they were just dumb rules, or they're just outdated now? Was there anything like that in your household?
I don't think so. Like, we were what they call, my sister and I were latchkey kids. My parents worked, and we would come home from school with a key and let ourselves in and amuse ourselves till our parents got home from work. Not really, no. We didn't really have too many boundaries. I don't feel now we had too many boundaries on us. I don't remember getting smacked. I remember the threat of it. I remember that, wait till your father gets home. But I don't remember any actual corporal punishment when I was a kid.
Yeah, I remember going to a kid's place. He was just around the corner from us. And this probably shows the different parenting sort of styles. And it actually hurts me to say it, because he was such a good kid. He and his sister were two good kids, and they were poster sort of looking kids and other things. But I remember they did something one day, and their mum said, "Wait till Dad gets home, and the belt will come out."
Oh,
and I thought, my gosh, and that even at that age, I think I was about 7 or 8. I thought, the belt,
yeah.
And can you imagine that?
Imagine
today?
the fear of that, waiting for your dad to come home. But that was the reality for a lot of kids.
Yeah, 100%. I know there were little things in our house growing up, and I'll ask you about your grandparents in a minute. But I remember we always had to ask to leave the table when we were finished a meal. And that's something that you don't see kids doing. Our kids grew up with it, and they asked whether they could leave the table when. But I mean, back in the day, I remember my grandmother, when she was with us, she used to remind me, we'd go into I think it was the David Jones cafeteria in the city, and you'd get dressed up, up to the nines when you'd go into town.
Yeah.
And she reminds me that as a little boy, and I must have been about 3 or 4, she said, "Oh, I had to actually tell you in the middle of the David Jones cafeteria that you didn't need to pop down on the floor to say grace.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my gosh.
Bless.
And, she said, oh, people were looking at you. And I'm thinking, oh, but that was a thing in her house that you would say grace before you had a meal.
We did
And
too.
so as a 4-year-old or 3-year-old, I knew no different. I was about to have lunch with my nan and my mum, and so what you did was you'd say grace. So that grandparenting thing, I don't know if you remember your grandparents or what.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to my sister the other day, and she said and I'd forgotten all about this, but apparently when I was about, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something, Grandma came to stay, and we're sitting at the table, and Grandma was there, and my sister and my mum was cooking dinner, and I back answered Mum. And my grandmother reached over and slapped me across the face. And my older sister said to me, don't you remember that? And I said, I have no recollection of that at all. And I said, what happened? She said, she slapped you across the face and said, don't speak to your mother like that. And she said, you started crying. And she said, I remember she was really angry at Nana for slapping me because she hadn't seen that before. But it's interesting that I was the kid who was slapped, but I have no recollection of it. I have no bad memories of my Nana. It didn't impact me at all. But the same Nana I can remember, like most girls, 7, 8, 9, 10, spend their whole life upside down doing cartwheels and handstands. God, I wish I could still do that. And Nana used to say, oh, Kaylee, get down, put your legs down. Like, young ladies don't do that. You don't show your underwear to people like that. And then she used to get stuck into my mother, and she'd go, she shouldn't be doing those things. Ladies don't do that, And it was funny when you think about the generation. And my mum used to go, oh, Mum, don't worry, she's fine. She's just been a kid, So it changed over time to then when you and I became parents, and read way too many books and strive to be good parents and try to be the best parents. But what does that even mean?
Yeah, look, I have to say that my Nana never told me not to do cartwheels and not to share my underwear. So it's changed lately, but I mean,
Yeah, but I'm sure you remember the girls at Epping West Primary School hanging upside down on the monkey bars, underwear out there for the whole world to see, but we didn't care, right? We didn't care. It. We were having a great time.
That's what it was all about, Speaking of that, sensitive topics growing up, and used to have the sex education sort of things at school because, that's just how it was handled. How was it handled in your place?
Oh, gosh. I don't remember ever having any sex talks with my parents or anything. I can remember... Oh, gosh, I know it's a podcast, but how much should I share? But
You've shared your underwear already, so it's only downhill from there.
Look, I think we might save that for another podcast, but I want to go into that whole idea about what we thought sex was at 16 and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole nother episode. But I didn't have any sex talks with anybody. Like what we picked up about those sorts of things was in the playground.
Yeah.
Right. What could possibly go wrong when you get your information from the playground? It was. But I think I might have mentioned to you in the first podcast we did talking about school, where, I have a sister and we live next door to the Johnston kids, and they were boys. And then one day over the back fence, hey, can I have a look at yours and I'll show you mine? And I was like, sure. And I dropped my Dax, and he's looking at me. He hadn't seen a girl's thingy before, and I hadn't seen a boy's thing before. And I was like, wow, look at that. And he's like, oh, yeah, look at that thing. He goes, where's your penis? Or he said, where's your dingly or something? And then my mum sticks her head over the back. Kaylee Harris, get back inside. Wait till your father gets home. Pull your pants up, young lady. But that's a natural curiosity for children, particularly if you don't have siblings of the opposite sex where you have any idea what that stuff is. That was just... was that where you were going with that question, or have I gone completely off on a tangent?
When you said that you might go too far?
Yeah, okay.
No,
good.
No, you haven't gone too far at all. Because I remember my parents gave me a little book. They gave me a little
Where did I come
handbook.
from?
Yeah, like where did I come from sort of book.
Yeah.
But there was the sex...
What did you think of that? What was in that?
Anyone that may...
Were you any the wiser after reading it as to where babies came from?
I couldn't be reading it. Like,
Really?
I started to look and I thought, there's not too many pictures here. And then they had a sex education
I
thing
thought it
at
was
school.
all pictures.
No, I don't. Maybe not the book I got. I was waiting for the
you got a
Brody's
different
Notes,
book.
the Monarch's Notes version, so it'd be truncated.
You're waiting for the Kama Sutra, weren't
Yeah,
you?
I sort of relied more on what was said in the playground. But
We all did.
I know, but used to have a sex education thing at school where they used to show ducks up on a screen and
Ducks?
yeah, because this is and the reproductive system, which was essentially like,
Hang on, why ducks?
I know. I just remember the ducks. They showed ducks because I don't think they could be too specific with.
What did they represent?
Well, I think it
the
showed
ducks?
like a mother duck and little ducks wandering behind them and things like that.
Oh,
So
okay.
rather
Yeah,
than
yeah.
just saying, well, this is A B C D sort of thing, they'd show ducks and all those sort
Yeah.
of things, and
Well, that was a language kids could understand. We're not talking primary school, right? Because I was in the same primary school as you, and I don't remember this, or did I just got no recollection? Have I just
you
blocked
didn't
it
take
out?
the note home, did you?
No, I didn't.
No. So I remember where it was. It was in a church hall. It wasn't a church thing. It was a school thing. But today when I look at even my grandkids and the way that my daughter actually explains it, it's very, I shouldn't say clinical.
No, but it's very factual, right?
It's a matter of fact.
Yeah, it's a factual
know,
thing. Yeah, and
that's
do you
right.
think that? I think that's better.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
I
but
think
once
it's better.
again, in another 10, 20, 30 years, are people going to look at that and say, oh my gosh, why did you teach your kids this? Or is that how you really went about business? I mean, it's one of those, once again, generational things, isn't it?
And I guess it's also about age appropriate. When your kids go through those stages where they ask you questions about different things, and you think to yourself, "My goodness, how do I answer that?" And it has to be age appropriate as well, in language that they can understand. And how do you, because a lot of the things you're talking about can be very complex, but how do you explain that to a kid who's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever? And then when your kids get to, I guess, sexually active, when they're 15, 16, 17, whatever, when kids start to explore those sorts of things, how, it's hard to have a conversation with your teenage daughter or son because you're the last person as a parent that they want to hear that stuff from.
Yeah,
They don't want to talk to
exactly.
mum and dad about sex. But really, when you think about it, it's such a normal part of life that they rely on us for everything else. But the one thing that's such a normal part of life, you don't talk to your parents about. And I don't get that, because that's very unique to our culture, and in a lot of cultures in Africa, for example, the mothers will explain to the daughters what's going to happen on the wedding night. And they will tell them what's going to happen. And I think that's a good thing, because we give them information on everything else. When it comes to sex, we don't give them information because it's considered, ew, I don't want to hear that from mum, but really, you should be able to give them good factual information.
And you're right. Depending on the culture, there's a whole different outlook on relationships and marriage,
Exactly,
everything.
yeah.
And I know we're a little bit insular sometimes in the way that we look, because our sort of focus is what we've been brought up with and we know. But I know you said this will be another podcast episode, sexuality and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I know it was frowned upon too when I was growing up, and you want to go away for the weekend with your girlfriend or whatever, and that was frowned on, in our household. Yet these
Yeah.
days, and I shouldn't say these, that really does make me sound old, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, right, whatever. Or am I out of step? I just assume that everyone's.
But would you have let your kids go away with their significant other at 15 or 16?
Well, probably not 15 or 16.
No, well, same.
But I mean, there was that whole thing, probably with your grandparents as well. And I don't know whether this is just the urban myth. You save yourself until you're married, sort of thing. If with
Yeah,
your grandparents
yeah.
or great grandparents, and I'm talking about a great grandparent, and my great grandfather passed away when I was about 3 or 4. But I remember going into that house, and I know I'm going off at a tangent. They lived down in Balmain, which was very much a working class suburb back in the day. But you
Yeah.
were not allowed to talk to your great grandfather when you came into that house. It was the old "don't spoke until spoken to."
Yeah, children don't get, should be seen and not heard.
That's
yeah.
right. And then, of course, that's carried over to their children, and a lot of those sort of rules. And it's sort of sifted down to us and now our kids. And that transitional sort of change it's a
But
very
now we encourage the relationship between grandparents and
that's
children
right.
and our grandchildren, right? It's encouraged and it should be. I think that whole generational thing is so precious and important.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know how to take it when our grandson come along, and there was some meme on Instagram or something from my kids saying, "How is it that?" And they showed a picture of this sergeant major in a hat sort of thing. How can this guy be this same guy now? Because that whole thing, that laid back sort of
Yeah.
attitude towards grandkids, and that's another episode, I'm sure, altogether. But if you had not your time over, but if there's a parenting style that you had or that you would like to see changed, or would you raise your kids differently? I mean, is there anything you would change?
Um, I wouldn't change. No, I don't think so. As I said, I probably mentioned it earlier. I'm not a fan of smacking children. I think, we raise our kids later in life to say you don't hit people.
Hmm.
You walk away from a fight. You don't hit people. And we don't, we shouldn't hit animals. We shouldn't hit vulnerable people, and children fall into that bracket,
Hmm.
in my opinion. So I am not a fan of smacking, and I'm sure people out there will disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. But I just don't think, I think that if you are getting to the point where you are smacking, you've run out of other options. And I'm not judging anyone who does. If that's, what's happened to you, believe me, I've raised 3 kids under 5. I have been in those high pressure situations where you just want to kill the little so and so's. But it's just something that I'm pleased I never really got into, was the whole smacking thing.
Because as a parent, it's almost an emotional response compared with when we were
It
probably at
is.
school, where it would be a measured response if you went to the headmaster or headmistress and you were getting the cane.
Yeah, but that's outlawed now, right? Corporal
Yeah.
punishment is outlawed now.
That's right. And I don't think you can equate the two, because as a parent, that a smack is an emotional outburst.
It is. You've lost a bit of
yeah.
control because you're so frustrated with that child. They're not doing what you want them to do, and you're smacking to get their attention. And I completely get that. I totally understand where that frustration comes from. But it's all I'm saying is it was not something that worked for me, and it's not something that I personally think is like, I don't believe it's okay. But that's just,
Yeah, look,
I'm not judging
all I'm
people.
saying is that as a parent, that is an emotional outburst. Yet when we were at school, it was a measured
Absolutely,
response
it was.
as far as that
Yeah.
cane or whatever you got.
Yeah.
And I still remember at high school, believe it or not, I think I was in year 7, and I wasn't a dobber. You don't want to be a dibber dobber. And this kid behind me said something, and there was a lady teacher who had a name. It was Granny, insert name here. She
Yeah.
was a much older teacher, and she probably was in her 60s, but she looked 100 when you're 12 or 13.
Of course.
And she thought it was me, and I wasn't about to dob the kid in next to me for saying something. So my hand was
Wow.
on the desk. She had a metal-edged ruler, like it was a ruler with a metal edge
wow.
on it, and she kept hitting the back of my hand until it bled, because I was stubborn
No.
that I was not going to move my hand. But my parents got wind of that, and they weren't happy, to say the least. But I'm talking, this is in the mid 70s, where teachers
Yep.
still felt there was an obligation to not
Yep.
spare the cane to do something, even whether you were right or wrong.
But that was half the fear of the
Gosh,
cane, in
yeah.
primary school, was that the anticipation that you were going to get it. Whereas at home, if you got a smack, it was usually a sudden outburst thing, and it would be over before it really, anything really happened. But the shock of it was the thing at home. But at school, when it was the cane, you were sent to the headmaster's office, and you knew you were going to get it. And yeah, I just don't think that we should be hitting anybody. I don't think that's a way to sort a situation out.
We don't advocate that anyone do that, or we're not advocating that should be an option in your world. But it's something that from our past that we're able to relate to. If I know we've got to go, because I think Mum will be saying the street lights are about to come on. Is there one parenting trend that you wish had been around when we were growing up?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. um, Well, you tell me yours because I can't think of anything.
I think that whole being inclusive, and I don't think
yeah.
I think kids still have to be kids. I don't think you can say to a 4-year-old you have the same rights and privileges as an adult.
Yeah.
Because that just doesn't work.
Yeah,
in my
I agree.
world. But I definitely think, as far as in being inclusive and that sort of thing is great. I think being able to include your kids in some of the decision-making processes rather than saying, oh, no,
definitely,
it doesn't need to be, but they need to be able to be felt like they're being heard.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree. The parent, just because I'm the parent doesn't mean I'm always right. I'm right and you're wrong. It's being collaborative, I guess, and listening to your child and getting some feedback. But again, age appropriate, right?
Every day of the week. Hey, I can hear Mum going, so I better shoot through. But can we catch up
Go
again?
back to the dinner table.
Yeah.
we will.
I won't say grace. I won't say grace tonight because.
You can say
Or
grace.
hang on, maybe I should. I know what I've been up to today. I'll say grace, but I'll just make sure that it's just a quiet word to the boss. We'll catch up again soon, hey?
See you, my friend.
Okay, ciao.
The views and opinions expressed on the Big 6-0 are personal and reflect those of the hosts and guests. They do not represent the views or positions of any affiliated organisations or companies. This podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for guidance on any personal matters.
And before we go, let's give credit where credit is due. Kaylee Harris and I came up with all the genius content for this week's episode. Our producer, Nick Abood, well, he keeps the lights on and makes sure we don't accidentally upload a cat video instead of a podcast. So thanks for keeping us on track, Nick. Nick?